Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media production. And the second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today, Alex Gollner will join me, and we'll talk a little bit about lower thirds in motion, and how to get those into Final Cut. We're going to spend a little bit more time talking about motion as we kind of go through this process. We think that it's an app that a lot of people are missing using, so we'll be talking about that for a couple Tuesdays just to kind of introduce it a little bit more. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we have?
Thank you, Alex. First in, Jeff Cohen from Miami Beach, Florida, asking, can we talk about the production value of the YouTube live event? Seems like even the biggest companies are using work from home as a free pass to put zero effort into their events.
Well, it was a very heavily voted question. So evidently a lot of people saw it and had opinions. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, so first and foremost, it should not escape any of us that YouTube long time has become, I think, the second largest search engine that anybody on the planet uses. They have gazillions of eyeballs traveling there all the time. So it doesn't surprise me at all that, like everyone else, they're interested in exploring how to be more engaging to the audience, how to provide more services. So the fact that they're doing live streaming now surprises me not at all. They want to keep that audience there and make sure they don't migrate out to anything else. I do think that this for them is like the early days. It reminds me of desktop publishing, where in the beginning you didn't have the capability to print things at home. Then laser printers came out and you didn't. Suddenly there was a lot of Drecky kind of work done. Eventually, over the course of maybe 5-10 years, it settled down, and the people who were really good at it were obviously really good at it, and everybody else kind of fell away. And I kind of feel like the whole live event online thing is going to go through the same thing. Right now, there's just too many people in there. There's a lot of people doing it very poorly. They will eventually find places like what we do here who are very oriented at making sure that the quality stays high. And I think people who are going to school on things like office hours will do well in the long-range transfer. People who are putting out those schlocky events will eventually fall by the wayside. That's my thought anyway.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
It's no accident that we sound and we look good here on office hours. We work very hard at that. And maybe it's just hard to motivate some people as to the apparent worth of having a good impression sound-wise and video-wise. So it's a shame, because the anecdote comes to mind. If you're a plumber and selling plumber services, you don't want a leaky faucet.
Yeah, I think that it's hard. It's hard because there's a certain company culture of like, this is okay. It's one of the reasons that we want to do the show every day, is to remind people that it doesn't have to look like that. Like it doesn't have to, that you can get on Zoom and produce a show that looks and sounds pretty good, and that it close to broadcast. I'm not going to claim broadcast yet, but we're on our way, and we want to keep on. But people ask, like, why are we doing HDR, and why are we doing, why are we experimenting with that, and why are we doing 4K, and why are we doing 5.1? It's to keep on pushing the envelope and show people that you don't have, it doesn't have to be your webcam. like you can do this at home, you can put this together, and I think that's the. It's why we do what we're doing here. I think it is. I do want to thank YouTube. We're making this comment because they actually sent us a link to go to their show. So we put the link out for everyone. Hey, because YouTube sent us the link so that I could post it in Discord, and now we're watching it and then we're complaining. So we should probably not look at the gift horse too closely in the mouth. But anyway, I think that it is. It's great content, by the way. So everyone, there's another day of it. And if you haven't seen it, it's in our Discord. It's in my announcements. There's another day of that, and there's a lot of great discussions. We just wish they'd use better cameras. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I wish these corporations would just get allocated like $1,000 budget for folks that are going to appear by standard issue kit. You'd have an Insta360 link, a decent microphone, something like an AT2020 from Audio-Technica that's like $200 USB mic, and then a couple lights, like a couple aperture lights in the $200 range, and done deal. And then the next level would be, $1,000 to $5,000, and just pocket cinema camera or whatever is the next level. But I wish that there was just a piece of this information on the internet that was updated, because that's the thing, is we've done this in the past, but all that stuff's got, we used to recommend the Brio, and now there's the Osbot, and there's all these other great cameras. But yeah, I think if they saw the difference, especially if we pointed it out, like, here's where your standard issue PC laptop up the nose shot. Here's how it looks and sounds, and here's what we can do with $1,000 in this kit, and here's the next level. So I think we got to train them, because it's unacceptable for a company that's a media company to put out that kind of content to that level of audience. It's not right.
We need one of those before and after shows where we just go to someone's, we go there and we look at what they're doing, and then it's like like when they get all made up, or they get, they clean somebody up completely, or, it's like
a whole makeover.
Zoom makeover.
Zoom makeover. And we take away. He was just using the camera on his laptop, so go ahead, Mitchell.
What's your favorite way to motivate people? What is it? Shame and ridicule?
Shame and ridicule. Yeah, exactly. We don't want to do that quite here, but we do want to point out it doesn't have to be that way. So you can definitely make it better, and that's our goal. Our goal here is we work hard and to make this show look and sound as good as we do. And admittedly, we probably have more people working on the show this morning than that up conference has working on it, and we do that every day. But I think that we are looking at also. And what 090 does, and what I did in Pixelcore was to make these things look better. So hopefully, and send out kits, and we've done a lot of that as well. So it's not that it can't be done. I think it's just a matter of what people think is important and how much budget was allocated, and so on and so forth. But if you look at what it costs to do a physical event for however many people went to watch that, the mistake that most people make is that they go, oh, well, it's online and we'll just do it as a webinar and it won't cost anything. And my argument is, just give me half. Just give me half of what you were going to spend on a physical event, and you'll never go back, like ever. You'll be like, why was I ever doing this? If you give me half of what you spent, because I work on these events. I know how much they cost, and so these are $500,000 events, $1 million events, $100,000 events. You give me half of that, and you're not going to have an experience that you're going to be like, why was I doing this in person? It's just, but when you do it for 1/10 or 1/100th of the thing, if you spent that in the real world, no one would think that was a good idea either. Next question.
John Foltz from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, has a question. I have a broadcasting student interested in getting into video engineering. Since I'm mostly a production person, where should I send her for resources, training, and info on how to get started? Thanks for any help.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I don't think that it depends on your area of video engineering that you're looking for. It seems that I would say the best place if you're looking for video engineering, specifically like television video engineering, is go to your local television station, work as an intern, and befriend the engineer there. Tell them you want to learn all you can. That's the way I learned, and didn't take any specific classes. I mean, there are classes, a lot of it, like at UCLA. There's a UCLA Extension used to offer a couple of classes in video engineering, which gives you just the basics, like how to read scopes and the composition of a video signal, et cetera, et cetera. But video these days is so diverse; it's used on everything from major motion pictures with video assist monitoring on the set to projection, theatrical projection, television engineering. It's used everywhere, and it depends on what type of video you're talking about. The techniques and the engineering is completely different in each one of those genres. So figure out which genre you want to work in and find an engineer and befriend them and work as an assistant.
Sorry, I got lost on my pages here. Where did I go? I was trying to figure out where this was. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree with Courtney. I think he's on target there. If you go to a college or even a high school that has a video program, you get an overview of the technical stuff. But if you really want to get the nuts and bolts, do exactly what Courtney was suggesting. Get an internship at a local TV station or even a cable operation. You're going to be dealing with engineers. They're going to show you the granular aspects, which is really valuable of what you're going to have to learn. So it's interesting that in our line of work, there aren't more institutions out there to train and to educate more about this. I think there's one of the people had mentioned, SMPTE, has some programs, and Courtney probably could speak more to that. But getting the actual intern apprenticeship teaching is probably the best value, particularly if you want to learn some of the actual technical aspects.
Yeah, and you're in the middle of the state, middle of Pennsylvania. I would also look at looking at internships as they relate to Rockleditz. Rockleditz is probably the most technical place that does video and audio and other things in the area that you're in. And they're very smart.
Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's just north of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Lattest, Pennsylvania, and they have a lot of capacity there. But it's a good way. They have to think about those things at an extremely technical position because of what they do. So anyway, take a look at that. Next question.
Paul Buchan from Columbus, Ohio. What are the IP-based alternatives to satellite pool feeds for live broadcasting? A landing page with a live stream, or are there more standard solutions?
Good guy.
Yeah, one of the ones that I've seen is TVU Networks. They have a back end where basically these feeds go up, and then you can enter in your own SRT address and have it shoot over to your decoder and bring it into your feed. So it looks like this. This is their grid video app, and it's one of them where you can just grab feeds that are constantly on. Like these ones are all looks like Speaker of the House. I mean, these are live. These are going on.
And
right
you don't
now,
have to have a TVU to do it. It'll just send to your endpoint.
You could specify your SRT feed, and it'll come to you over SRT. So there's other protocols in there as well, but you have to pay for this stuff. But yeah, that's one of the outlets out there. There's more, I'm sure.
Yeah, most of the time when we've done it, there's been a couple things. For the major broadcasters that want to use IP, and these are typically internet-based broadcasters. So when we do an event, typically there's a couple layers of pull feeds. The top of the line pull feed is the switch, and so we will drop something to the switch. This is not an IP. I mean, it is an IP. It's technically an IP solution, but it's not. You have to have a subscription with the switch as a network. So we'll put an event on the switch and drop it into New York, typically New York, DC, LA, and that usually hits all of the major networks. Unless there's something, if it's a technology-based thing, we'll put it in San Francisco and then sometimes Chicago. The reason you put these in different cities is it makes sure that the news broadcasters don't have to pay long-distance charges for those that transmit. Now, that is nearly uncompressed HD video, so that's a much different process there, and it has some pretty significant expenses connected to it. Other people use LTN to do this, so these are the two big ones that we use, and then of course we often put it up on a satellite and then make it free to air. So those are the three things that we oftentimes use to get this out to most of the networks. Then if we have a large IP client that wants to do it, we will actually ask them how they want to get it done. And we'll set something up where we're sending it to them directly and kind of handcraft that for each one of them. Then when we've done the other ones, and TVU sounds like a great idea. What we've done in the past is do HLS, just basically an HLS pool. So we just make it available via HLS, give them the address, and they can pull it from there and run it. So and that has been a relatively easy thing to do, and it's something we just can do on AWS. You just put it up there, and they can just, once they have the address, they can pull the data from there. And that's been how we handled most of those. But the TVU one looks like a really interesting solution. Next question.
Mike Edwards from Brooklyn, New York asked, "Morning, everyone. Was going to wait for Audio Day, but what impact do you think Rode's acquisition of Mackie will have on the market in the near future?"
Good, Bill.
Well, there's a lot more competition now, so I think not as much as it would have. But Mackie is a fascinating story. I think it was Greg Mackie and his wife started this as a small boutique thing. They had a huge impact. I can't tell you the number of 1202s in those early Mackie mixers, which were really good for the price. They were U.S. built. They were solid as a rock. A lot of us used them for decades. Eventually, they had to move their outsourcing overseas, and they got into the bigger things. But they just grown the company and grown the company and grown the company. Rode is now on a roll. They've got so many products out in the mix now, and they're making a lot of money. And so it seems like a perfectly sensible acquisition to me. And I'm pretty sure that the Mackie founders are now at that point in life where they just want to step back. And so the fact that they found it and the brand will go on kind of makes me feel good, makes me feel warm and fuzzy. This is the traditional American entrepreneur story gone very good. And they helped a lot of us all along the way.
It seems to be the MO for the Australian companies is to find American companies with great technology and business models that aren't working and buy them, which is Blackmagic's MO. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Who hasn't had a 1200 series Mackie board that they've lived with? And they've occupied a niche in the marketplace for so very long, and I think it just got very crowded for them. And perhaps that's why their efforts to expand into amplifiers and mixers and other devices that relate to it. I think it was very strategic of Rode to purchase them because they got a brand that everybody recognizes. And as long as they maintain that Mackie niche, so to speak, I think that will fill out their product line very well.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Mackie used to be big in the prosumer mixer and recorder and software market. But, Behringer kind of ate their lunch. I think that Behringer took away a lot of their business, and they really kind of dropped down the list of the competitors in that area. And I think they're kind of looking at how they're going to claw their way back. And I don't think they can compete with the Behringers price-wise and feature-wise. Behringer's just doing knockoffs of everybody and was for years. So I think it was wise for them to sell out to Rode. Rode can use it to take it in a new direction and can apply their digital mixers, have them produce them and have a foothold in the United States. Rode can do that, so it's a little closer than Australia. So I think it's probably a good thing for Rode and Mackie. It's probably the right time to get out for them.
Good guy.
Yeah, Rode's made a few acquisitions over the years. Aphex, they've acquired Event, which is loudspeakers. Soundfield, so they've got their toe in that water as well. But live sound is where Peter Friedman cut his teeth. So he's looking at the IP. So this is really IP, being able to grab patents. And, like Courtney said, Behringer really ate their lunch. I don't want to say copy, but yeah, you can tell that they took maybe a little bit of Mackie's history there, and
they were graphic for graphic clones at one point.
Yeah.
Literally, you couldn't look at a 1202 and a Behringer knockoff and see any differences at all.
Yeah, so I think it's more of a financing thing. I think it's where Rode's big dollars that they've made over the last few years have attracted some big money, and so it's a privately held company, so we don't know what those numbers are. But Peter Friedman did make the Australian top 100 entrepreneur list as far as personal income. So he's up there with Grant Petty. He's got the money now. The banks are paying attention, so he can make some acquisitions and roll that stuff into the line, and then watch out, because now they got the loudspeaker market. So that live event sound is the market that they're going after, and we'll see some interesting things at NAMM 2024.
I don't think it'll make any difference immediately. I mean, I think that we're probably going to see something in 2025, 2026 is going to be the real results of what's happening here. I do think it's interesting. There's so much technology in Australia. I blame JCar. JCar is the electronics store that's down there. It's like Radio Shack on steroids, and I think you just have more kids and more people playing with electronics. You end up with a smarter group of people that are working on electronics. So anyway, it's interesting. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, with Blackmagic Design ruling the iOS camera roost now, do you think that we'll see any attention to the ATEM Black Crush?
It's not crushing across all the products. It's crushing when it's converting to H.265 and H.264, and it does appear to be that happens across many products. It's not going to affect the iPhone at all. Like that, the in processing is completely different. I believe that the issue that we're seeing with the Crush is really related to a chipset that probably can't be changed from the devices that have it. So I think that I don't know how they fix it for everything else, but it's not going to affect the phone at all. I think that what is being related to, and I don't know if we talked about it on this show or not, but Filmic laid off their entire team. And I think a lot of us, I think we talked about it here on the show almost immediately, like, well, that's that, because, and the problem was it's a 1-2 punch. They Filmic, who've been on our show and are friends of the show, I think that the new ownership really wanted to go into subscription, which really turned off an enormous number of their users. And I think that they thought they could force that because they were the best in the market. Like they were definitely the high watermark in the market, and then something else came in above them. And that's the one thing that can't happen, especially when it's free. Can't happen when you've basically they had to get through kind of the transition period where people were really upset about the subscription, and they just didn't get to the other side of that hill before Blackmagic came in with a product that's probably 4 times as capable as Filmic. I've had Filmic for years, and I'm using the Blackmagic camera almost every day. And I can tell you that it's about 4 times the features of it. And it's hard. The one thing I will say is if you're using the Blackmagic camera, you do need to use it every day to figure out where all those buttons are, because it's a pretty complicated. It's as complicated as a regular camera. Next question.
It's a QR code question coming in from Francis Frey from Cambridge, Massachusetts. I want to delay the audio out of my Rodecaster Pro II before it goes into Zoom in order to sync with video. I can't use the output delay in the Rodecaster Pro because I'm using a custom mix, like a hardware solution.
So you want something that is interesting. You want to put something else in that line to slow it down. One thing to look at is whether you're using a Mac or PC. You may end up wanting to use software to delay that audio. So you can delay the audio in software. I think Hijack will do it. Audio Hijack will do it on the Mac, but I'm not sure what will happen on the PC. I'm trying to think of I don't know of a lot of inexpensive ways to delay audio going into the computer. That's the only thing that I'm just trying to think of. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, we used to have to do this a lot when we were doing PA for large events where you have an audience up close to a stage and then you have an audience in the back. There are a lot of hardware delay units that work in milliseconds. The typical use for them is so that the stacks on the stage are putting out sound and it's going to eventually get to another set of speakers in the back, maybe 100 yards away. So there is a perceptible delay in that audio. So they have a lot of hardware things, and I'm trying to remember some of the brands that I used to use, and they're not coming to me right now. But if you look at hardware delay, you'll find units that are specifically designed to delay your audio in a very precise fashion, usually used for live sound.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, we used to use a thing from Behringer called the Behringer Shark. You can still find them. Here's one for $75.
I just have to say that I used to own 10 of these, and they're
hard
noisy.
to deal with.
And
they're
so
noisy. They've been discontinued, and you can only find them used. And it's not the highest resolution delay you can find.
Try overmodulating that. Overmodulating on the Shark is super painful. Like it's like just grating. I don't know. It's a serrated knife against.
But what has replaced it? Where's a cheap single unit delay line that you can buy, hardware delay that you can plug in?
We used to spend $500-600 for the rack mount delays for what I was talking about. So it was hard to find things cheap.
There's one here that's called I haven't I've not used this, but Sescom makes a lip sync corrector, which is some type of thing here. I'm just looking at it, but it looks like it's just for home theater. So it's like, I don't know. Yeah. It looks like might be, I can't tell what it is. I can't tell. It's the pictures aren't very good. But yeah, there's definitely units that will do this. I think that the real challenge that I'm trying to think of is if you're doing this, how much money do you want to spend to put into it? So, because there's lots of things at $200, $300, $400, $500 that can do delay. I think the question is really what's one that, given that you have a Rodecaster Pro, what's something that's not as expensive as the Rodecaster Pro to do the delay that you're trying to do? Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with you on that. There's a bunch of DSP boxes out there, like from Symmetrics and companies like that that'll do it, but none in that same price range. You need something that just a simple analog or digital delay, as long as it's not noisy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I don't have I don't have anything that I would recommend out of the gate, only because I just, a lot of our systems, a lot of our mixers, a lot of our, have some sort of delay. It doesn't like you could put an XR18 in the middle of it and you can do it there. I'm trying to think of and a Flow 8 I think has delay in it, but that'd be putting a mixer beside a mixer. So that seems like it would be a lot of money to spend. But I will say that the Flow 8 is probably the cheapest thing that I know of that will do the delay. So that might be, and I think it does delay. I believe it does. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith from Chautauqua, New York. I digitize VHS tapes and older media, and I want to change my setup to have each VSR send signals to my machine via HDMI using the RCA to HDMI adapter. Pros and cons of the Blackmagic design DeckLink quad HDMI recorder.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, they certainly have the engineering talent to do this. I used to do this a lot. They had a little product called the video recorder that I was able to plug into the side of my Mac, and it pigtailed out to RCA, 2 audios and 1 video. And its transcodes were remarkably okay. I think it had H.264 built on deck. You may be trying to get higher quality than that, but I do know that their engineering team understands this thing pretty well. So I would have a pretty warm and fuzzy good feeling toward Blackmagic design solutions in this area.
Good guy.
Yeah, if you're not doing a whole lot of this, I would just farm it out and get it converted professionally, because the guys that do this really well have a SVHS deck with a TBC in it, and the difference is pretty remarkable as to the quality. So if you're ever bringing in VHS footage to edit, do your homework and look at either acquiring the gear, because you can buy these decks. I have one. It's a SVHS deck, and then I've got up-down cross converters, and it's a big hassle. But if you're just doing a onesie twosies, farm it out to somebody who already has one of these. Because if you do the research, you could find, I'll put a link to this, but you could see what happens when there's an SVHS deck with the TBC and without. You just get all this interlacing artifacts, and it's just a mess. So I would recommend farming it out to somebody that has the equipment and has done all that research, because it's a lot. I mean, you could spend 100 hours just getting it all configured.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree with Guy. I think that if you're doing a one-off, obviously farming out. But if you're going to do this on a regular basis, get a decent VHS deck that will shorten the distance between what you want to accomplish and what you're trying to do. There are I did a little search on. There are a bunch of VHS decks that output HDMI and have the time-based corrector in them. And they also generally have DVD players in them too. So for like $200 or $300, you can get stuff that will plug directly into your computer and accomplish that, rather than having the expense of DeckLink cards and other converters and things like that.
Good, Courtney.
And, I always recommend the standalone capture devices. Look for game capture cards. And there's some of them out there that have analog inputs that have S-video and or just regular composite video and audio inputs, and will do H.264 recording right to a disk drive, a USB disk drive, or an SD card. So you can look at those. And it's the cheapest, easiest way to do it, and you don't involve a lot of software and computer accessories and so on.
Yeah, and I would go back to, if you have less than 50 tapes, send it out. Like, to get this correction correct, right, is hard. Like if you're going to go through the trouble of, I want to capture this so I can save it give to my kids or save for my archives or whatever, getting every VHS tape to look good is not trivial. Like, just know that it's not just plugging it in and making it work. It is, you want to send that out. I have a high 8 tape that I have to figure out where to send to, because I want to finally get the content off of it. Same thing. I'm not going to even try to even play it. Like, I'm just going to send it out to somebody to have that handled. Next question.
Vic Hernandez from Springfield, Missouri, asks a question: may I have a recommendation for a 3D printer with an enclosure and a duct for venting? Or would an active airflow possibly interfere with the printing process? Up to $500.
Go ahead, Bill.
I don't think it's going to interfere with the process. What I would be concerned about is if you're going to do some kind of positive airflow venting, you're probably worried about the ink drying out over the course of time. So what I would probably do is make sure that it's on some kind of a timed switch. So you turn it on just when you need it. I wouldn't let it, run all the time attached to your printer in an enclosure, because I think that positive airflow might cause you problems. If you're going down this direction, I've used these in my voice booths for years. It's a very quiet, low flow, but it can actually pop up to pretty decent flow ventilation things, and they've come down in price because people are using them for other things than what I use them for, which is always my booth ventilation, and they've been really positive for me. But I would worry if that much airflow was hitting your print cartridges that are full of ink, because it may dry them out over the course of time.
I don't know if I ever pronounced this right. I use a QUIC, which is it's an enclosed one. That's what I have in my house. I don't control the airflow, but it's totally enclosed, and I have a cat, which is why I have it totally enclosed. Anyway, so it works exceptionally well. So that's and they make a small one for $279. Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't know if is a small one enclosed. It's cheaty, by the way.
They have a cheaty. Is it cheaty? Mm-hmm. Cheaty. Okay, there we go.
It's pretty cheaty.
It is a. The small one isn't. There's one called an X Smart 3 that is it's a 175, 180, 170 enclosure.
And they make the Chryon K1 is enclosed, and it has a vent fan on the back. You may have to modify it a little bit to get to have it read the temperature control of the inside the cabinet, and the fan that's on the back of it, exhaust fan that's on the back of it, you could put a hose around it and vent it out a window or something if you're printing some smelly type of ABS or something. But that does have an exhaust fan in it that controls the temperature inside the cabinet, the K1s, and they've come down in price now. I think they were on sale for under $500 over Black Friday.
The Cheedy Max 3, I couldn't believe, is now $900, which is about the size of the one that I have now. Mine's many years old now. But that's 12 inches or almost 13 inches by 13 inches by 12 and a half inches. So they're definitely getting to, and I will say the interface looks way better than the one that I have. So, I do think that there's Anchor makes some as well that are there. I think that for most 3D printers, I find that the user interface is horrible. So I feel like that's I think that a lot of folks that kind of come from an engineering background that then make products tend to ignore the user interface, and they tend to pay a price for it. When someone else comes out with something that isn't as good but has a better user interface, they oftentimes lose to that person because they're not paying attention to it. Go ahead, Bill.
Vic, if you're looking for something, I just noticed, I was looking at that picture and I realized they have a new model out that does both airflow and humidity control.
Well, this is the duct.
Yeah, so I'm thinking to myself, maybe if this adds humidity, that may be something that'll keep this from being a significant problem in terms of ink dry out. So
I think the venting is mostly just so you don't smell it. But yeah, next question.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany asked, what is the best way to show a 3D picture created via photogrammetry on a website? Which file format is the best to use? It should be rotatable by the viewer.
Go ahead, Guy.
Depends on how you're acquiring. There's export options like to Sketchfab, and there's different ways of being able to send if the other user has an Apple device, being able to pop it right in through a text. I'm using the Polycam app, which I just got on Black Friday sale for the year, and scanned the Cybertruck that was in our local mall, which was pretty cool. And this is just published to the Polycam site, so after you do a scan, you can just publish it and then send that link to a client, and then that way they can go in and they can, zoom in and take measurements and all that stuff. And then other users can actually download the file and see all the points and everything like that. So that's how I would do it, is Polycam.
Yeah, as far as creating it, I think this is the display of it, and I think that's a little harder. I would look at, I actually, one of the ones that a lot of people use is Sketchfab, and I don't know whether they send them to that or whether there's a way to embed that, but Sketchfab has a lot of different tools that are related to that. I would also look at the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian has a large collection of 3D models, and look if they talk about the viewer. I didn't quite get to this fast enough this morning to look at their build there. I have to admit that I deliver stuff in USDZ, so when we put stuff on people's website, if you go to like clarity.io, you'll see a little, if you go to I think it's called the node, and you'll see a USDZ file, and Chris Ritchie in our group built that. so that's up there, and you can download. The cool thing about the USDZ is, again, if the person has an Apple device, it will literally show up to scale on their desk, which is kind of cool. So it's not as cross-platform supported. But it is super cool for the folks that have it. So anyway, next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida, asking, what is the MOQ, Media over QUIC streaming? Is this a low latency HLS?
I'm actually not that familiar with that format. And I would say that I'm not a big proponent for this low latency HLS. Like I have to admit that I'm just going to kind of ping on that a little bit. Once it's over a half a second, I don't care. Like, I just don't care how long it takes to get there. I just want it to be stable. So as we lower the latency, what you're doing is you're taking away the buffer, and you're making the buffer not available. I mean, if you can't interact, who cares? So the thing is and I know that I sound very old-fashioned when I say that, but I do a lot of this. And yesterday I was measuring, latency across the country, and as soon as it gets to about 500 milliseconds of latency, I don't know why it matters whether it's 2 seconds or 3 seconds or 5 seconds. It just doesn't like it. And what you're doing is you're taking away the stability of the product, and people's home connections just aren't very good. So you test it in the lab and you go, oh, on my 1 gig down, 50 up, connection, it works great, when I'm wired. But what happens when the person's watching on their phone? So people build these pipelines, and I just find that they stall a lot. They build up a lot. The thing is, there's a reason that YouTube has a big buffer. It's not because it takes that long to get it to you, but it takes that long to make sure that you're going to get a smooth viewing experience throughout the entire thing, which I think is far more important than whether you get it in 1.5 seconds versus 5 seconds. It's just and so I'm not. I know. I just find in our industry right now, people are super obsessed with this, like, we're going to get HLS down, or we're going to get things down to 1.5 seconds. I'm like, sure. If you can get it under 500 milliseconds, you have my undivided attention. If it's over 500 milliseconds, let's just take the time to make sure that it's actually good. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I did a little digging in before the show because I saw this question pop up, and it just really makes me start thinking as you dig into. I'll put a link in the chat, the article that I was reading, how deep this goes and the challenges that folks like Google Meet and Zoom have been trying to solve. So it's like, what is our next level even for this show? If we wanted to stay in this low latency world, how can Zoom help us, get to that 10 megabit, like 422, or like if we want better color, better resolution, will they get to 4K? So what is that next codec? And this, I think, is that path. They're beating down that path. No?
And I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to. Like, so to me, the next generation is a dual pipeline. So we're gonna, that's what we're gonna start experimenting with here, which is we talk in Zoom, but we send SRT at a much higher quality stream that is slower. So we do, and there's some challenges there. I know that there are challenges, but I think that's a much better solution. Trying to deliver to each other, like, we can have this conversation at 640 by 360, and I'd rather turn that latency all the way down so that we can just, or 1080p, but have it be a little choppy or whatever as we talk about it. And then be able to send an SRT that is 5 seconds behind or 10 seconds behind. I don't really care, and send it to somewhere where it's going to be 4K, 10-bit, log, or whatever we want to send it. We send that out to the other side of that. That is going to produce the best looking talking head show ever made. Like that is so that technology. It's logistics for us. But all the technologies sit there available to us right now, trying to deliver in real time that high quality. I do that. So I sent a 270 megabit stream round trip yesterday across the country for round trip. So each leg was under 200 milliseconds. So that's, so it's less than that. I'm just I can't say the numbers exactly, but each leg was under 200, and that's across the country, and that is really expensive. Like that's private fiber. I'm using the switch for that, and so it's possible to do that. It is not possible, in my opinion, to do that over the public internet. Like to do it stably over the public internet, there's just so much trash that you're driving through a bunch of roads and you're weaving through all the trash and the burning fires and crazy people all the way from one side to the other, as opposed to I have a big highway that nobody's allowed on, and I can go as fast as I want. So it's just, I don't think that it is possible to have the quality that we want at the latency that we need. And so, my view of this is to have two pipelines out of somewhere to make that happen. And I think that we definitely can get there. I just think that's what we're talking a lot the lot next year. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm ready when you are to go.
We're working on it.
Piece of hardware. So I already have the encoder. If we put a decoder over at John Wallace's place, which he already has an Osprey Talon 4K SC going out, but now he needs one going in. I have a 4K camera HDMI coming out of this feed, which can pop over there in pretty quick timing. But it is hardware, so it's $2,000 and $2,000. So you're getting up to $4,000 per panelist.
It's hardware right now. So we're thinking pretty hard about it. So I don't. It doesn't need to be hardware. So anyway, so we'll there's a lot of discussion about how that works. Probably not stuff I'm ready to talk about on the show just yet. But we're thinking really hard about what that dual pipeline would need to look like. You can do it over software. So you could have a camera coming into a computer, and that software there can be saying, I'm going to send you a low latency, and we could be joining Zoom or whatever, but the software on your computer could be getting the same feed and sending it out via SRT. So you wouldn't need a box to do the SRT. You could do the SRT from your Mac or PC. That, Larix will do that, right? So there's ways to dual pipeline that right now. And so we're just trying to get everything working from the move. Still tired from the move. But I think that we're going to be working on that in the first couple months. And I do think that's our next generation of the highest quality. That's how we get to the true highest quality. And there's a whole bunch of problems for the panelists. So that because we don't all have 4K cameras, we don't all have 4K capture devices, we don't all. So we're just baby steps, down that path to figure out. And it may be something that we do for special events before we do it for the regular panel, so that anybody can join the regular panel, but we might do like a WWC coverage, or we do something else and we just turn all the dials up to play with it for the folks that are there. So stay tuned for more of that, but we're definitely thinking really hard about that. But I do not think delivering the kind of quality that we're looking for is possible on the open internet. Like I think that there's a bunch of physics problems there that are going to be almost impossible to, because the delay between us matters. Like that's the other thing is people who are technology driven, who only care about like, oh, it's low latency or whatever. When people talk to me about, oh, we can do conversations over SRT, I'm like, okay, well, you're at 500 milliseconds. And that is an eternity. Like to me, that is that does not create a great show. And so I don't like, I think that we really want to be moving our latency down to live below 200 milliseconds, each way minimum. And then we want to figure out a way to get higher quality. And I don't think you can do both in the same pipe over the open internet. You can definitely do it over private fiber. Next question.
TJ Asher from Minneapolis, Minnesota has a question. Sony PlayStation is pulling Discovery content from folks who purchased the content at the end of the year because WarnerDiscovery is yanking the shows. Will this breathe life into the physical media, or will folks start sailing the seven seas again?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Louis Rossmann just released a video on this because he is major upset about this happening. And it says it's driving him back to piracy. And this and a Netflix 4K issue where you have to have certain hardware. Even if you pay for a 4K download, if you don't have certain hardware, you can't view 4K for Netflix streams. And he talked about the Sony PlayStation pulling the rights to this. If you've, I guess you serve a lot of this stuff is hosted since it's streaming, and if you put it in your library, it's not really downloaded into your PlayStation. It's probably stored on a server somewhere. You just have access to it. And if WarnerDiscovery is changing the access to the servers that host these programs, then WarnerDiscovery, then access to it is going to be removed. So you lose the price, you lose the ability to see it, even though you've paid for it to be in your library. So they may have to do something to fix this. I don't know how they're going to fix it, since WarnerDiscovery is going through a lot of trials and tribulations right now, and they may not be willing to put any effort into having to fix this, or having to get you to some way download it into your local library if they show that you've paid for it.
Yeah, and the problem is they technically don't have to. Your license, in that terms of service, they hold the right to take the stuff away and everything else. And I think that in general, this is the problem. I don't think it's going to push I think people are past. I think this is what they're betting on too. People are kind of past physical media. Like there are some people that are going to hang on to it and buy it, but by and large, 99% of the population now don't really have the capability of looking at hardware, like actual media. I will say that, for the things that you really care about, if there's something you want to watch over and over again, games are a little harder. For things you care about, just remember that less expensive Chinese HDMI to SDI converters like AView and others have a bug, quote unquote a bug, that doesn't pass the HDCP through, and you can record that stuff and keep it there if you really want to. But I don't know if there's a lot of 4K ones that do it, but there's definitely a lot of 1080p's. Those have been around for a long time. Go ahead, Mitchell.
This might also be the tip of the iceberg, because with all this consolidation and shifting back and forth that's being done, things are going to get more complicated as we move forward. So I think WarnerDiscovery is just a tip of the iceberg of what could be happening in rights and how they get distributed.
I lost my headset. I can't hear you guys. Anyway, let's go to the next question.
Next question is up from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany. What application does support the showing of USDZ files on a Windows computer? I'm asking for a friend, and I'm looking for free viewer software, not AutoCAD or Blender.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I think it depends on your version of Windows. Windows 10 had it built in, they call it 3D Viewer, and I think it'll do 3D USDZ files. This is what it looks like. It's you can download it. It's in the Windows Store if you have Windows 11 and it doesn't. Just search for 3D Viewer. It's probably on your machine already. Look, you can look down inside. Well, where to go? Oh, look, you can look down inside a dinosaur while it's walking. It supports animated and 3D models of a variety of types. It has a lot of a library of online models you can use, and there's a 3D paint as well that goes with that package that lets you paint in 3D objects and images. So look for that. It's free. It's on the Windows Store. Microsoft
Next question.
And it's from Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington, also here on our panel. What are some tips for directing a TD graphics playout and cam ops via comms?
Go, Bill.
This is one of the most complicated things you will ever try to do. And I think, honestly, the only way you can learn this is to just do it. Getting 4 or 5 or 10 or 20 human beings on a comms network, the director, the technical director, the team, the show caller. I mean, we've had examples on the show where we pointed people to things like there's Super Bowl backstage videos on YouTube that let you hear the calling of a massive show. And you can see that it is an incredibly precise ballet. A lot of rehearsal. Everybody knows everybody, what they're supposed to do. The camera moves are all, but the keeping in the moment. And I remember listening to one of the big ones. The woman calling the show was just as calm as can be. She was precise. There is a rhythm to things. I mean, it's really kind of like this giant mind meld of all these professionals working together. And the only way you're ever going to get that is to just do it over and over again. I am encouraged because I was in the first generation, I think, I was able to do 2 and 3 camera shoots when I was in my mid-30s that we kind of cobbled together for like local music performances, and we rented a ClearCom system, and I was able to practice and make lots of mistakes. I'm still just woeful at it. I'm not really good because to be really good, you have to do this all the time. It is a specific and brilliantly important skill in my thing, and it makes the difference between a good show and a great show.
Yeah, and I would listen to, as Bill said, there are examples on the internet of people and YouTube of people calling shows. Listen to that. Take advantage of that, what that process looks like. Do not make things up. Like, do not think that you're going to do some new way of calling cameras because you won't fit in anywhere. So you're going to build muscle memory. If you're doing shows over and over and over again, you say ready camera 3, ready camera 4, camera 4. Do not start making up different ways of calling the show. Listen to how people have been doing this for a very long time. And if you start coming up with a new nomenclature on how you want to call we hear this every once in a while. We'll get a director that hasn't done very much of it. Usually they're kind of they're a client who wants to do it themselves or whatever, and they start talking about it, and you're just like, nobody understands what you're talking about. Like the camera operators don't understand. No one understands. This is a pipeline, and you're getting people who are freelancers that are coming in, and you need to do it a certain way. And so the best thing to do is to listen to, again, these big football. The thing you want to listen to, if you can, is live American football. It is the hardest thing. It's one of the hardest things to call. It is very, very, very high quality. These are, they're spending an incredible amount of money per show to do this. They have a huge team to make this happen. And when you listen to that, that is in my opinion, after I've sat on comms listening to lots and lots and lots of things, that is the highest order of live calling that I've seen. There's lots of other things like Eurovision and other things that are very, very fast paced, or someone reading a list. I'm not talking about, like, there's things you'll see from live performances like a Christmas special or something like that, but someone's just reading cues at that point. They're not like, what I'm talking about is having to dance with what's going on and calling a show. really hard, and it's an incredible thing. So if you can, listen to some of that. But the best thing to do then is you want to be a camera operator. So if you want to learn how to do it, you want to be a camera operator. You're going to hear it. You be an assistant. Just get on the floor, and make sure that you can be around it. Get on comm somewhere, and then. Get to be a camera operator, then get to be a TD at some point after you've camera opted for a while. But, and then you'll get to be a director somewhere in the future. And sometimes you'll be a TD who's calling shows for little shows. And now, admittedly, for Pixel Core, we would put, we had small events, and I would take guys that have been camera operators for a little while and go, okay, you're going to TD this show. There's like 3 cameras and there's almost nothing happening. But they'd heard a bunch of the shows. They'd been on the comms for a while, and so they would take on these little shows to do them. And then they'd slowly build up from there. But I think that most of the people that we put on any major show probably had 10 years. Like they'd been in production for 10 years, like before they started calling shows. So like like shows that mattered, like that. Just so it just takes time, because, and also you do have to get to a point where you're not raising your voice every time, you're not freaking out every time, or telling someone, because if you're calling the show, I think I said this before, but one time I asked NASA why they were so calm, and they were like, well, we find that, raising our voice over comms does not improve survivability. So it was just, so you want to think about that for your show. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, yesterday we had Jeff Keithley on, and I had the pleasure of working with him and Noah Sargent on a show last week. And to hear Jeff call a show over comms was just masterful. So I was kind of throwing the ball to him, and this question got pushed back because we ran out of time. But yeah, I was a camera op for years and would listen to a variety of different TDs and how they ran the shows. And there was a nice soft cadence, but I wish that there was more people that would take the time, like our own Garrick Parmalee, who used to be on the show a lot, does his church comms and show calling. It's where he puts like a GoPro in the booth, and he's really good for just a guy that's covering his local church. I mean, you get different levels of folks that are doing this at the highest end, and I've been fortunate enough to hear some of the highest level that Alex was just talking about. I've been blessed to go on some of these in these trucks, and so I've heard it at the highest level. It's just, where can we learn more, because there's only so much YouTube. I wish more people would say, this is for education purposes, let's go ahead and put this on. Because, there are some nasty things that are said over comms if you get the wrong crew. So a lot of people don't want to put comms on YouTube, but there is definitely some learning to be exposed.
Yeah, the best training that we did for this was we had some concerts that we did at the stage that we had. I don't know if you saw any of those.
I did concerts. With
Marcia. And listening to her talk to people who actually didn't have a lot of camera experience. I mean, there were people who had been using the camera for as long as the show had existed. I mean, it turned on, and listening to her kind of talk the cameras in and call the cameras and everything else, I thought was a pretty great experience as far as just really understanding what it would take to call a concert, right? And what that looks like, because she's got thousands of concerts under her belt, and we put it on Zoom so you can just listen to it. One of the goals that we have for next year is to do that at a larger scale, where we're going to do a show, and then if we deliver all the ISOs to Zoom, you could take Zoom ISO and pull all the cameras back down and cut along with us. Like, so you can listen to her call a show while you're TDing. And that's probably the fastest way for you to learn how to do it, because you'd be able to hear her talking to the cameras, but you can follow along and cut to those things. That
would just be a great service to the community. I mean, especially if we can get a little GoPro in the booth as well to actually show her and what she's doing.
The funny thing is, for a bunch of those, we had gotten to a point where she was literally she's at home in the middle of the country and calling the show, and either Chris Fenwick or I or someone else was actually cutting the show to her call. But she wasn't even, she's just watching it over Zoom, calling the show, which I think is a pretty cool thing. Anyway, so we're working on it. I mean, that's what we're working on, a venue that we can do that in and make that work. And so stay tuned. But that's something we're really looking at hard for next year. Next question.
Ready to take 3. Next question. Tlaloc Lopez Waterman on the move. With Filmic at end of life, does the Blackmagic iOS app give us a solution for a clean HDMI output for folks who are using the phone in a live workflow, like Conversations with Tony Mobley?
The answer is yes. The reason I was distracted earlier is I was trying to find a cable. I think I packed them all for my test yesterday, trying to find a cable to show it to you. But yes, you get a clean feed out of it. You can set it to be clean feed out of the phone. So you can absolutely get a clean feed from the Blackmagic camera. And you have more control than you had with filmic with that feed that goes out. So the answer is yes. Next question.
QR code coming from Roscoe Jones over in Key Largo, Florida. Hollywood has had a problem with the crew falling asleep when driving home from a location shoot after a director chooses to go too long. How do we protect ourselves and others?
Go to Courtney.
Well, and the union has dealt with this, been trying to get this taken care of for years. They've been trying to get rules to say 12 on, 12 off. Haskell Wexler strove hard to get this passed through all the unions, but it still goes on because, they have schedules to fill and they figure, they pay by the days. The problem is when they budget something, they schedule a number of days of production, and if they go a day over, it works against the producers. So if they can make the days 16 hours long, it still only counts as a day, even though it's a day and a half, basically. So what happens is they end up working 16 hours, and then this throws you into creeping call times, where your call time gets later every single day on a multi-day shoot. And so that by Friday, you're having a 5 p.m. call and you're working into, the middle of Saturday halfway. And so you're losing your Saturday because you have to sleep. So what they've done as a concession, the unions have put in there that if you're working past 12 hours and you're in a distant location, they have to, or even if you're in a local location, if you're out on location, not at the studio, they have to offer you a local hotel where you can spend the night, and so that you don't have to get up and drive back to the distant location in the morning with a short turnaround. So that's the only solution they have right now, is to offer you a stay overnight. And they have the latest contracts, and coming up on a new contract next year, we're going to try and get that negotiated in as to longer turnaround times to keep them from going into it.
Good,
but
Mitchell.
just making a penalty of making them pay more for those extra hours isn't a solution, because they'll just pay more and work them because it keeps shorter days.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, this isn't theoretical. This has happened, and people have been injured in these circumstances. The union's doing the best it can, like Courtney just said, but it doesn't necessarily cover independents or people that are doing guerrilla filming out there. It's dangerous, and I think it's going to take a few lawsuits to get everybody to wake up and take notice.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think it's very important to pay attention to that. I have been in this state of creativity where I'm on a location and we're shooting, and I can see things developing, and I can see if I can just move everybody over 10 feet, even though I'm going to have to break and take longer, and we set up in the first place. And so there's this constant tension between artistically getting something done right or as well as you can, and all the other ancillary pieces, including crew safety and the rest of that. I'm not forgiving any of it for 1 second. And these people who say, yeah, my vision is to have you walking on the train tracks, and the next thing you know, somebody is killed by a train because they weren't paying attention. There's absolutely zero excuse for that, ever. But I understand the moment you see that shot and you're going, could I get that? Could I do it? And then sometimes your brain can't go in both places. You can either get this piece of art or you can let it go and protect everything else. And it's just, I think there's always going to be some constant tension there in the creative arts between what we do when we're by ourselves, which is just work to get the exact right thing, and this necessity, this critical necessity to pay attention to everything else around you in the moment of that, wanting to get it just right. So it's hard.
Yeah, I know. As a producer, I think that I've grown over time, because I was kind of notorious for really long, hard days. Never 16 hours, though. I mean, I never went that long. But 12-hour days and grueling, productions and everything else. And I just learned that I didn't produce as good at work. Like it was just, people made mistakes. We lost a lot of time. We lost a lot of other things. And I learned to kind of slow it down. And, I think that Clint Eastwood does 8-hour days. Like he just does, like that when he shoots his movies, they're like 8-hour days. And he's just like, that's what we're going to do. We're going to do 8 hours. And he just says it's about the crew being alert and awake and managed and engaged. And he believes that they do better work that way, which I tend to agree with. So as a producer, when I'm protecting my team, and I have to do it almost every show, of like, hey, we can't load in here, we can't do this, we can't do that, we have to do this. it's because I know that I'll get better work out of it. It's not just taking care of their well-being. It's knowing that they're going to do a better job. Like if they're not, totally out of steam. You want to have a lot of gas in the tank, so to speak. Alex Gollner's here, and we're going to be talking about motion here in just a second. But a couple quick things. We're going to talk about recording the podcast. I'm going to show you kind of where we are with the Michael Krasny show, the Gray Matter show. This is what I'm doing and what's working, what's not working, what we're working through. And we'll have that discussion tomorrow for Wednesday. On Thursday, we're going to be talking about the Blackmagic camera app. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we know so far. We talked a little bit about it when it came out, but we're going to be talking about it a little bit more on Thursday. We're going to talk about streaming to multiple locations on Friday. So if you a lot of times it needs to go to more than one place. We'll be talking about that. And then Saturday, of course, is Q&A, where we do a lot of R&D, and a lot of people are training and getting better. And Sunday, of course, is introspection. And now we're going to go ahead and jump right into the second hour. Welcome back to the second hour, and I'm really excited. We're going to be talking about lower thirds in motion. We have Alex Gollner here. Alex is the person that I look up to when I think about computer graphics and how to do a lot of these 2D animations and so on and so forth. And I think Alex and I, the two Alexes, have I think we've both used motion since probably version 1. And I know I have, and it's definitely one of my loved apps that I work on, and I feel like it doesn't get enough screen time as far as talking about the stuff it can do. And Alex is probably one of the one or two people that it's Alex and Mark Spencer are the two people that if I'm trying to figure something out in motion, or if I need something done in motion that's going to work, I'm going to call, generally get Alex to jump on and work on stuff. And I've done a bunch of work with Alex on doing 2D animations. And so we're going to do a couple of weeks in a row where we talk a little bit about animated emotion so you can see what's possible. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Good afternoon, good morning, and good day to you all.
Very good. And we're going to talk a little bit about lower thirds today, right?
Yes. I mean, I think we were thinking that it's a good idea if we just share getting people comfortable in motion. It's making it not a scary place. So what we actually do in motion will be useful, but much more of the fact that it's no big deal. It's initially looks like a strange place, but if we start pointing out what parts, say, you don't hardly ever need to use or you don't need to look at yet, makes it a lot more kind of chilled out and relaxed place.
And I think the biggest challenge is when I came from After Effects. So I spent a decade in After Effects before I opened up motion. And I think that really and I still use After Effects for a handful of things. But for the most part, my daily driver when it comes to, I got to throw together some graphics is motion. And I think that it's just a matter of learning how to kind of it's not, I think when someone starts brand new, motion's not a big deal. When you come from, After Effects, it becomes a little bit more complicated. And if those of you who don't know motion, the thing to know is that this is a $50 application, not $50 a month, not $50 every upgrade, but you will pay $50 once and be able to do all the things that we're talking about today.
Yes, I mean, I used to come in Final Cut Studio 2. So initially, it was a good amount of cash. It was $800 or $700 initially.
I forgot that it was so expensive that you had to spend lots of money on it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So then you did get a benefit of spending $249, $349 for the update for the whole of Final Cut Studio, and then a new version of Motion came along with that. But,
right.
No, it's amazing value now. And partially one of the problems people might have with it is they may not take it too seriously if it costs less than a plugin. So if it costs less than, say, Element 3D or something like that, people, what can it be? But it's underneath all that, I would describe it as, 2/3 of the features of After Effects. But you could say, but it's the 100% of all the features that most people use in After Effects.
Well, not only that, it is, we did, we'll probably show this in a future episode. Now, I've done lots of visual effects shots with After Effects, but we did a film, a Japanese film, maybe 15 years ago, and I was talking to Kevin about it. I was like, did we do all the shots in motion? Because there's over 200 visual effects shots. And he's like, yeah, we did. I said, all of them? And he's like, yeah, we did them all. They're all in motion. And the reason for that was in 2008 and even now, the real-time engine inside of Motion is so powerful that we were able to do, we had about 105 of those 200 and some shot, 208 or 204 or something like that, visual effects shots. A whole slew of them were car shots, with green screen. And we were able to loop it. So we're just watching a live loop while we're making adjustments to it. And that was a really, that was what saved us. I mean, we didn't, there was no way for us we would have never been able to produce the shots in any other application. So it is a very powerful application. That was a full film release. I mean, that's not like that wasn't, like a small project. So anyway, so it really does have, it has the capability of doing a lot of really high-end work.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is that obviously back in 1991, 92, Moore's law meant that you didn't have to worry about the future of technology when designing video editing apps, motion graphics apps. So when After Effects was coming along, they just kind of knew, well, we've had the 286, we've had the 386, the Pentium's just come out. There's going to be more. We don't have to worry about the fact that there's resolution needs to increase and frame rate needs to increase and more complicated, higher data rates. We're going to be okay as CPU power gets more powerful. But around 2002, 2003, the CPUs started slowing down and they weren't increasing as fast. And essentially, if when you look at Motion, you can see it's like the vision of one or two crazy people, because it's just like, okay, we're going to do everything in the GPU. And obviously, living in the GPU and being real time was not really a priority for After Effects and Premiere and NLEs in those days, because they just thought that the CPUs were going to kind of carry the day. But GPUs was the future, or as they say these days, the Mandalorian, they are the way. And they certainly are the way when it comes to things like obviously to do with AI and ML and things like that. So essentially, Apple bet on a different future of graphics. And at the core of Final Cut Pro is that Motion engine, is the compositing engine. It is a real-time app.
And I think that's important, is to understand, if you're using Final Cut, that Motion is able to deliver, and this is what we're going to show a little bit today, the graphics engine that sits inside of Final Cut is the same graphics engine that sits inside of Motion, so that Motion's able to deliver a lot of different assets to Final Cut, and then those play back in Final Cut.
Yes. So the thing is that I think when Apple were casting around for re-engineering Final Cut Pro, because they had to re-engineer it because it was essentially a demonstration of what the old QuickTime was, QuickTime, the playback system. And that was relatively old. It was already coming up for 18, 19 years old back in 2009. So they needed something else. So Final Cut Pro X is actually a demo of AV Foundation, the thing that replaced the QuickTime playback system. So inside Motion, there it is already. It's real time and it's all in the GPU, and that's how we're going to be playing back video anyway. And ProRes on QuickTime played by AV Foundation, and Final Cut Pro being the demo app, and that's why it appears in lots of promotion stuff to do with Apple hardware and operating systems. So yeah, it's a real time. But what is real time app? Why is that a good thing? Because ideally, once you get comfortable, this is not on the first day. Once you get comfortable, you realize you're playing it and just trying things out and having a go. Whereas to some extent in other applications, you are coming up with ideas, but then you have to be a technical operator for a minute or so, or 30 seconds when you do some you target some tracks, or you set up some parameters, or you do a bit of scripting in After Effects, and you connect things together because you have an idea, but then you have to go through a technical process to get back to the bit where you're playing again. But in Motion, sometimes if you try stuff, it kind of generally works. And as long as it's looping and playing and you keep on going, then it's like, oh, that seemed to work. I think I'll try this. So it's the play part of creativity.
We often talk about in visual effects, you never finish a shot, you just run out of time. And there are two aspects, the two biggest aspects of Motion, because you can knock out a lot of things in a lot of, I saw there was a matte painter named Yusei Wesky at ILM, and he could 3D model with there was a cyber, can't think of the name of the exporter, but it would take a depth map and wrap it around out of Photoshop, and you could export models. Yusei would model things in Photoshop. Like, you can do anything you want from any app. The issue is that can you see the difference between good and bad? As an artist, can you make a decision? And B, how many times do you get to see it? Like, so can you see it, and how many times do you get to see it are two of the problem. That's probably 80% of the problem. The technology is 20% of the problem. And so when you're able to loop something or see something really quickly, if you're not hitting render and then walking away and coming back, over and over and over again, your ability to get to a better product, if you can see the difference, is greatly increased.
So yeah, I mean, so I suppose maybe what we should do is go into Motion, and I'll set up what its relationship maybe with Final Cut in terms of making a lower third. Yeah. And then we can make it more complex or leave it at that, or answer people's questions if you like.
Sounds good. What we'll do is we'll do a little bit of it for a couple minutes, and then we'll come back and answer some of your questions. And so keep those questions rolling in as you see us working through that, and then we'll jump into them a couple times. Go ahead, Alex.
So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to start off in Final Cut Pro. So here we are in Final Cut Pro. I've got a piece of footage here of a lady making pasta in Italy, and she's making orecchiata, which means she's using, in slow motion, you can see the detail of her using her fingers to get this specific shape. But in real time, it looks like this. Oh, of course, I slowed it down when I filmed it. But anyway, you get some idea. So we would like to add a lower third to this. So Final Cut Pro, just some footage. So what I'm going to do is going to switch over to Motion. I don't have anything open in Motion yet, so the only thing that's changed up here is the menu bar. So I'm going to go to choose File, New. And what you can do in Motion is you can create different kinds of Final Cut Pro elements. You can create effects that can use to add effects to clips, content such as graphics and elements such as maps and circles and animations, even transitions between clips, so you can animate clips on and off or make them dissolve, do anything you like. But in this case, we're making a Final Cut title. So these are the different kinds of projects, and the Motion project is a straightforward, what you would call a project to create animations or compositions, and the kind of thing you would be using in Motion to export your graphics directly from Motion as QuickTime movies. The kind of stuff you'd do as a video to play back at an event or something like that if you had some animation that you created, and then you would put it back into your playout server or something like that. But we're going to create a Final Cut title. So I'm going to choose a preset in terms of, if I choose this preset, it tells me the resolution of 1920 by 1080. I could actually choose 4K, but Motion is actually completely resolution independent. So this actually doesn't particularly matter unless you're copying font point sizes from 4K timelines or UHD timelines. But you can choose your frame rate and your duration. Now, as I'm from the UK and I do stuff in Europe, I'm going to choose for now 25 frames a second. But you should know that in Final Cut Pro, if I had a different kind of timeline, I mean, here I actually have 30 frames a second footage because it comes from my iPhone. It doesn't matter. I don't have to worry about frame rate when creating these titles. It's all handled effectively. I think in Motion in terms of seconds, but if I'm dividing something into parts, then I will think in terms of frames per second. So I choose the preset, although I can choose custom here if I want, and frame rate of 25 frames a second, and it's like 6 seconds. I'm going to say 6 seconds. I might even make it something slightly less than that, because maybe for a lower third, we might want it to be something like 4 seconds long. So I press return. I should have clicked OK. So then what we have here is the Motion user interface. So it looks rather complicated initially. I don't use necessarily this library, but I do recommend it, because there are lots of things here that will actually are very quick amounts of simple content that one has. So I'm going to pick an example of, let's try replicators. And here's a replicator, in other words, something that creates lots of different patterns. So you can see that it'll play back. This is the kind of content that is designed to go below a lower third. Back in 2010 or 2011. So it was cool, bear that in mind.
It had its moment.
Yes. So in 2011, this is pretty cool. But I think we've moved on a little bit. But The thing about this content is it isn't that you see animating up in the corner here. It isn't a load of bitmaps. These are elements in motion that do create these animations. So if you see these rectangles appearing here at different... These are ways of actually you working out how to animate these things, because you can open this up, put it on the timeline, and break it apart and see how it was animated. So that is just the replicators, in other words, taking a single shape or group of shapes, and then making multiple copies of them, and then making something move associated with it. But you also have things like particle emitters. So if I go to something like that. So this is the kind of thing, I know it's ridiculous that I'm showing all this stuff on a tiny screen in the corner, but what I'm really doing is just introducing to you to this library tab. But in general, I don't have to use the library tab very much, because I'd much rather do work with simple tapes, single bits of text and shapes, which I draw myself. So most of the time on these two choices, we're on the inspector. And what this is, it just shows whatever you've got selected. It shows associated properties and other things. So at the moment I have the project selected. If I go to properties, it tells me what the width and height of it is and other settings. But most of the time, if I'm honest, I hardly ever touch any of this either. So what I'm doing with you now in the user interface is saying what to look at and what not to worry about. So obviously you can see lots of settings here, but don't worry about them, is what I'm saying. So usually I'm on the inspector. And then what we have here is where our animations are going to happen. And then we have our timeline. So I'm going to press play. And it tells me it's playing back perfectly well at 23, 25 frames a second. And the idea of these, the fact that if I'm doing playback, is that if I go to behaviors, I can apply a behavior to something and then it immediately animates it. So what is a behavior? Well, a behavior is something that modifies a parameter usually over time. So I usually choose this from up here. But if you like the library and you want to go to behaviors, you can go to a section such as basic motion, then you can see a preview of what happens. In this case, the cog fades in or fades out. Or quite a famous one for me is you make it so it grows or shrinks over time, like this. And the idea is grow shrink applies to a set parameter. So the question is, if I drag this on here, I can make this text grow and shrink over time. So to be clearer, the strange thing is, even though people who use motion don't often use keyframes, sometimes it's really useful to see a keyframe graph to see the result of what you're doing. So a good setup to get comfortable in motion is to get it playing and looping. But it's a good idea to make it a relatively short loop. So that's why I chose 4 seconds. So then I'm going to show the keyframe graph. Now we don't have much here because we're not selecting anything. So I'm going to change the position to the ratio of these different panels this way. Just so you know, After Effects fans, you can't make these into separate windows or rearrange them. It's more about changing the proportion of these things, turning them on and off. So you'll get used to the kind of Apple way of doing things, or in terms of not having total control over your user interface. But let's say I have this grow shrink behavior and I just drag it and drop it onto type text here. Nothing seems to happen. I've got this value here. If I look down here, it says it's going to animate the scale X and Y, but nothing seems to happen. Because the default thing for this behavior is not to change anything, but to be ready to change something. So I'll show you what I mean by that. If I go to the inspector, and I've got the grow shrink behavior selected, I can make it so I'm going to scale over time to 200%. Now, this is not necessarily what we want, but what I'm doing is showing you by the fact that immediately you can see the result of what you're doing here.
And this is less of a, I mean, one thing you want to think about with that graphic is not so much a keyframe viewer, but a F-curve viewer. So this is the function, and we call it F-curves, the function of the position over time. And so while there may not be any keyframes there, what they are is it is showing you what's actually happening to the positional data over that period of time.
So as you can see, This is real time to the extent that I can change the final scale of this, whatever object I drag this onto, so it's 50% of what it was. I can also change, as you can see here, the end offset. So I can make it so this actually happens more quickly. So this is just an example of just one behavior. But what is it really doing? So if I go to select the actual text itself, then I can see various properties associated with it. I can see the properties associated with this layer that I have selected, or the object I have selected. And if I go to scale here, so I've got its position could it be modified, its rotation, but I'm going to go to scale. And for some reason, this is very strange. Oh, there you go. You can see the percentage slowly change. So you can see the result of these two parameters are being changed by this behavior. And you can see that it can be controlled by this little cog, which means being controlled by these behaviors. So I'm showing you what this is about, and the reason I'm explaining it is the real-time nature of playing with this thing. But this is not actually, I must admit, part of my design of my lower third. It's just to explain elements of what you find in motion. And what a behavior is something that modifies a parameter over time. And
we've got a couple questions rolling in. So let's before you get into the actual lower third design, let's go ahead and answer a couple questions. Let's go to the first one.
Okay, it's from Robert Sababity in Poland, and he asks, are there any standards for how long, how many times an animation of lower thirds for different types of events? For example, corporate, entertainment, closed group, etc.
Alex, do you have any guidelines?
Well, it really depends. Sometimes it's more a storytelling thing, strangely enough. So it really depends on your story. Sometimes you want to introduce someone, because I usually think in terms of video editing, but also video editing applies to how you tell the story of getting somebody into a show. And sometimes what you want is what they say and who they seem to be the most important thing. So sometimes you won't even show a lower third until they've made their first point. And then, to back it up, you put the lower third there. Or sometimes you have it there all the time because this is a very important person, depending on the fact that we're always referring to it. And if you want to do a screen grab of it, this is who is saying it. And this is giving them an authorial voice across the whole time period of them speaking. So really, it's more about to what extent you want people to be distracted or not distracted. Or anytime you add graphics or anything to a screen, you're thinking in terms of what is it doing and the service it's performing. So I, as a documentary maker, so I used to edit documentaries and sometimes still do, you do want to introduce a person and have the lower third appear. And if you have, say, effectively a 40-minute documentary, then you probably want to, when they come back a couple more times, you want to put their lower third there again to remind people of who they are, because 25 minutes later, they're forgotten. So I would say 20 minutes later, it's probably worth showing who they are again. Or if there's been too many people between one person and another, and the story is very complicated, and we've come back to the world of this person, then you put their lower third again. So it's more about getting into the mind state of the viewers as ever, which is kind of what we have to do. So the answer is not very long, as short as you can get away with, because they are distracting, is another way of looking at it. So that's why I put that kind of 4 or 5 second kind of duration. But the good thing is, in the case of editing software, if you're putting it into editing software, you can change the duration in Final Cut Pro very easily. And that's not a problem. But as regards for playout, it's more a kind of show caller decision. So it's really the show caller waiting for a beat and waiting for somebody to make their point. And then they would say they use switching to get it off. And that's what I'm used to in the UK, or events that I've done out of the UK. It's a kind of, okay, we know who they are. Let's clear everything off the screen because we really want to go to a close-up and go look into their eyes if we're following their emotions. Because it doesn't really matter who they are now because we're really hearing what they're saying. Or sometimes it's like they need support. So you have their lower third there all the time because really they're maybe not such good at speaking. So you have their title for what company they are, and then you have it there all the time, which kind of supports them in a funny sort of way because who they are is more important than how well they're getting it across. So the answer is there are no standards for this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no standards. I will say in live, I usually, my rule of thumb is typically 5 to 7 seconds. And that is 1 up, 1 down, 3 to 5 in the middle. Like, you know, and what I'm looking for is how long does it take me to read it? So when I'm putting these together, I actually read it out loud, like how long. And a lot of times what we'll do is we'll have it flow in, but then we just let it hang. And so then we decide to just fade it out. Like we don't have an animation for it to leave. That way we can just decide how long. And a lot of times it'll roll up and we'll watch it. And I'll literally you can almost see my mouth moving of like reading the person in a relatively comfortable to make sure that you had a chance to read it. Because the other side we get into is people have a really long name or really long title and we only gave it 3 seconds up and then people didn't get to see it. And you're trying to, serve the audience as to giving them the information that they need, and you just got to make sure you give it to them long enough. But 5 to 7 seconds is usually 99% of the lower thirds that we do for live. Because the other thing is, if you want to keep it as short as possible, because I shot a close up of that person and I'm about to cut away, I can't cut away until I get rid of the lower third. so I need to make sure you can read it, and I need to get out of there. So one thing that drives me crazy is when people build lower thirds that take a long time to get to the point because I'm hung until then. Like I can't do that. Next question.
Next question in from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I've got a 2015 MacBook Pro running the latest OS. Can I use this Apple Motion in the lower thirds?
Alex?
Yes. So if you look at the specifications for Final Cut Pro and Motion, they're the same specifications because the thing that's playing back stuff in Final Cut Pro is Motion. So if Final Cut Pro plays well on your 2015 Mac, it will be fine. Because essentially all those templates that are playing back, nearly 99% of all the titles built into Final Cut were made in Motion. And you can even open those titles in Motion to have a look and see how they were made. So if it plays, you can use it. So that'll be fine.
And when I said, I did 200 visual effects shots, that was in a Motion in 2008 on a cheese grater and sometimes on a laptop. So there's plenty of power there to do most of the work there. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida. What sort of affordable lower third content automation is available for names, locators, and similar text other than professional systems like Chryon, etc.? Any to integrate with rundown software?
Motion's not really a live, even though it does a lot of live output, it's not really designed as a live output for motion graphics to do for a show. So I think that what you're looking for is affordable. We have seen people do that. There's been some software where people will take because one thing about Motion is it's generating an XML file. And so, I have seen some software. I don't know, Alex, do you know if that software's still out? I can't remember where. I think it kind of came out and I don't remember it continuing on, but it would take your Motion document and literally build a live, you could build a template for a live output, for their live output software from in Motion. Because one of the hard things is to build all the rules is hard in Motion, but to just play it out was easier. And so they figured out, but I don't think that software continued on. So I don't think this is probably the best way to do this. I think you're going to use it as you're going to render it out with an alpha channel, render it out over black, render it out, or save it out for Final Cut. Next question.
Jack Cannon from Phoenix, Arizona. Is there a website or community where people upload Motion lower third templates for those just starting off?
And this is specifically for Motion. So when we answer this question for the panelists, go ahead. Alex,
So there's a Motion, there's not specifically that I know of in terms of it being a community where there's that, but there are so many free Final Cut Pro templates. So every time you see Final Cut Pro title or free Final Cut Pro titles or FCPX free, every time it's a Final Cut Pro title template, the ones that are free, you can open up a Motion and see how they work in that respect. So I've made a bunch as well. So if you go to alex4d.com/free1 or free2, there's some lower thirds. Now, I don't do ones that are designed quite so much as more like functional, because I would like to make them flexible enough so you can use any typeface or any font or any color with them. But there's lots of free stuff out there, and there's some sites which have kind of links to all the free Final Cut Pro templates. But they're all of those templates that are free can be opened in Motion for you to have a look at, or to use for free in Final Cut Pro, or to use for free in Motion.
All right, go ahead, Mitchell.
I go to programs like Envato where you can download those Motion templates.
Are they Motion templates? Do Envato have Motion templates?
Yep, they sure do. You can select it under vector graphics or motion graphics. And sometimes I don't buy them. I just go there if I need a little inspiration. Like, I can do that.
One of the best resources for graphics, in my opinion, is Motion VFX, which they do focus heavily on motion. And I like to tear apart when you buy their stuff, you get the motion document for it, and you can tear apart it and learn a lot about how they put them together. What were you going to say, Alex?
Yes, they are crazy though. So you will actually that's learning on hard mode, I must admit, because they will actually make things more pretty complex in order just to get stuff done. But they're doing advanced stuff. So once you can take one of those things apart, it's like the old days when you were 4 or 5, you take a radio apart, and the first 4 or 5 radios will fall apart. But when you put them back together properly. Yeah. That's what they're like. They're as complicated as a radio that you'd actually have to put back together again before.
I don't try to put them back together. I just try to I just dig through them. A lot of times, if I'm that's a place that I go. If I just need to throw a nice lower third, I don't have time to design it. I don't have time. I'm just like they have a lot of really good stuff there. But I dig through them because I'm like because I like to edit them a little bit. Like, oh, I want this, but I want this, or I want this, or I want that. So I'll go dig into it. But a lot of times I just open it up. But like Alex, but even Alex sends me documents that I don't understand how they work in motion. Like he'll send me something, I'm like, I don't even know how you did that, and so it's anyway. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you do catch on to the tricks they use, like how to shy layers and pre-compose that stuff.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I found this. I don't know if this is an appropriate site for Motion Array. I think they offer a variety of templates for After Effects and MOGRT and Final Cut Pro and DaVinci Resolve, and you can just select them and tell them what if you want lower thirds, you click on lower thirds and it'll filter based on that. But I think these are for sale. I don't think these are free.
And a lot of times I would say that it's really it is really good to look at other people's lower thirds. If you look at we go through lower thirds every once in a while in our show where we look at other people's lower thirds. We look at that process. It's the reason I have YouTube TV is specifically because I'm recording every broadcast all the time. And when I want to think about what are the current uses of lower thirds or super sources or whatever, it takes me half an hour to collect, 50 different examples to kind of look at and piece apart. Next question.
Robert Shoji from Los Angeles, California. What is the best resource for learning the basics of Apple Motion?
I would say Ripple. Ripple training is so Mark Spencer does a bunch of trainings on it. It is, I think it's the best. Like as far as learning motion, it's really really well laid out, and usually they keep up with it. Alex, were you gonna?
Absolutely, I would say Mark. Mark's videos are great. There are many 50 or 60 free tips on motion on their channel if you go back. And I think they've got a playlist for using motion. So I would actually start off when it's worth paying for one of their tutorials and getting there. I don't know the names of the individual tutorials, but get their first main tutorial and buy that. And then probably I would guess if you look out for the word rigging. Rigging is the real super secret sauce part of motion. Sounds kind of scary and weird, but it's to do with, but it's really worth knowing. Yeah. And once you've paid for those two and looked at those, then all his tips would just expand your knowledge, and it's more. But as I said, he's very good at making you feel comfortable. Yeah. And once you get comfortable, then you're going to be okay. Usually
when there's new things that come out in motion, a bunch of new features in the past, when motions come out, I just wait for Mark's training and get it. Mark's going to save me a whole lot of time, and I'm going to be able to learn how to do that really quickly. Yeah. So Ripple training is where we would recommend. Next question.
Jack Ruppel from Breckenridge, Colorado has a question. Can motion be used in virtual reality 180? I want to add to the margins only, visible in Pancake, when mobile moved far left and far right. Let's realize the full potential of mobile content.
Alex?
Well, motion got 360-degree features a long time ago, relatively a longer time ago, when they kind of bought in Tim Dashwood's plugins. So they were tools that could be used inside Motion and Final Cut Pro, but they cost a bunch. But then they were built into Final Cut Pro and Motion. So they were built into Motion, and that version of Motion is then available inside Final Cut Pro. So they're as powerful as you'd get in anything inside After Effects and Premiere, but the advantage is that Motion and Final Cut Pro actually know what 360-degree video is, as opposed to what After Effects and Premiere don't really know what it is. They're just being fooled into doing it in a funny sort of way. But most of the real experience and most of the knowledge out there is using Premiere and After Effects to do 360-degree video. So I would say yes. The answer is yes in terms of monoscopic. It's the stereoscopic in Motion. You don't quite have enough. You don't really have control of the left and right eyes. Essentially, what you're doing is you're applying the same effects, controls, animations, graphics to the left and right eyes nearly all the time, apart from a few things. So it's part of the way there, but Apple kind of stopped with version 0.9, and they didn't really get to 1.0 or 2 because it just went out of fashion just at the wrong time. 360-degree video, I would say. Well, so the answer is yes, you can, but I would guess it's going to be back soon, because guess what's going to be used for the Vision Pro?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that's really important for Apple is that with the Vision Pro, owning their own ability to generate content for their own hardware is something that's very Apple-y. And, so I think that making sure that I would assume that many features that we see, what I'm expecting from Final Cut next year, I think we got some updates here and there, but what I expect from, and with no knowledge, I don't have any inside knowledge, but with it, I expect to see far more 180 and 360 tools being added to Final Cut and Motion by the end of next year, mostly because that's Apple's way of making sure that they can produce those things. That they can, there is a tool out there. Otherwise, they're waiting for third parties to constantly build the content for, to build the tools to take advantage of their platform, and Apple doesn't like doing that. So I think that's, I think that's one of the big reasons that we're going to see, I think it's one of the big things that supports Motion and Final Cut is the need for be able to own their own destiny in that sense. Go ahead, Alex.
Because the thing is that when we come to spatial audio is objects being anywhere you want them to be, and they produce sound. Apple's current definition of spatial media is media in a room that can be in any distance, in any position. And the interesting thing is that spatial media is not the same as spatial video, because obviously spatial media is actually spatial audio plus spatial video. So Apple's definition is slightly not quite right, in my opinion, because essentially what they're saying for now is spatial video is stereo video over a small area, which actually doesn't make that much sense. It's not much of a leap. But if spatial video is a video object which can be positioned anywhere in 3D space and actually has an alpha channel and depth implicit within it, then Final Cut Pro and Motion are going to be really good at working on the individual video objects that then will be composited in real time when we use spatial video.
And of course, we have all that data. Taking a motion file that you built and putting it into 3D is something that is quite possible as well. So, I mean, there's a lot that can be done from an authoring perspective inside of Motion. So it'll be really interesting to see where that goes. Next question.
Robert Shoji from Los Angeles, California. Any plans in after hours for Apple Motion workshops?
Yes, we're starting here. so we'll do a couple weeks of this, and then we'll do more of it. But I think that it's an important thing to cover. Go ahead, Alex.
Yes. So this is an experiment to see if I can get my mind around how to explain this slowly enough and clearly enough, because I'm no trainer. I may know how to do it, and I think I'm quite good at
but you have an English accent. As an American, we're like, you have an English accent, so you're already halfway there.
Thank you very much.
And then you're one of the most knowledgeable people in Motion. So then you have another 30 or 40% of it. So I think we'll do well.
So yes, I'm exploring doing it this week and next week, and then we'll kind of have a much more free form hanging out with method. I think it'll be quite nice. So that's what I'd like to do. Yeah,
absolutely. And you don't have to feel like especially for these, you don't have to feel like you have to walk through everything. We can just show stuff and we'll talk about it. Next question.
Peter Belbin in Houston, Texas asks, I've seen Motion rendering out content for later playout, but could it be used to live render the output with key and fill via SDI?
Go ahead, Alec. The answer is I'll cut to the chase on this one. No, it's not a pure. It doesn't lock the frame rate, and it doesn't lock out like that, and you just won't. I've thought about that for a long time and then realized that the engine just isn't built for that kind of work, and it would take an enormous amount of engineering. Like we'd probably stop getting features for a year or two if we allowed it to, if we tried to do key fill out. What it does do is do an alpha channel out. So we render ProRes from Motion in 4444, or we render sequences out that we can use inside of these engines, but we can't do it directly from Motion. You're going to say something, Alex?
So in practice, Apple are not interested in the terms key fill. It doesn't get them excited. But if we say, wouldn't it be good if we had live spatial video output from Motion? It's actually what we're really talking about, funnily enough.
It'd be hard. I mean, again, the engine, to lock an engine to a frame rate is not trivial. So that's if you look at, like, for instance, Epic, to get Epic to do broadcast graphics was not a non-trivial task. Like, it was an enormous amount of engineering, and Unity chose not to go down that path because they were like, "Oh, it's hard."
Well, I suppose what I'm saying is that if we get Apple to use the Vision Pro budget to get it to do it, it's more like they're more likely to invest the engineering. Maybe,
I just don't even know I don't even know if I'd want their engineers to worry about it. Like, I feel like I'd love to have an app that read motion files and output and was what I need for a real-time playout engine. Also, I don't want to have all that interface there to do it. I want it to be. I just think it's a different process. Like there's what I need in a consumer car. I need access to my radio, and I need everything to be a certain way, and I want to be able to turn the air conditioning on. And there's another version of it that is the NASCAR or Formula One car, which is a much different interface. And I think that's the thing that I don't think I would want them to do. Expend energy trying to, do what you're talking about. What I would love is proper TGA export, proper frame sequences of TGAs, not going through a compressor and not as a compressed TGA format, because then we could export things easily for our Blackmagic hardware, because the pings have some aliasing issues, and so now getting TGAs out of Motion is no trivial task. So in fact, for me, it requires After Effects. Next question.
Robert Sababity in Poland. What is the latest trends in lower thirds, and is it viable to follow these trends and suggest them to clients?
I go to Alex.
Well, I think clients still like being like TV news, I would say. So be like Alex and essentially have lots of recordings of news that you like and news that you don't like. So obviously you could point to CNN and say they may do it, but it's rubbish.
Right.
Because it is. Because they're totally kind of schizophrenic when it comes to typography and design.
So sorry if you're watching. If you're watching this from CNN, like, stretching text is not okay. I don't care. It's not okay.
But essentially, the fashions come with big. So I would say in Europe, strangely enough, the Eurovision Song Contest is a big deal, because essentially it's the peak of technology in lots of different aspects. It's actually the peak of technology when it comes to live events, in terms of synchronizing lots of sources from all over Europe, all over the Eurovision network, which is actually a network of other places like Australia and Israel as well. And weirdly enough, clients will look at that and say, wow, can I actually have what they have there? And then usually what happens, those usually appear in live tours. So you have people like George Michael, then it would be one who will be walking on an LCD screen. So that was kind of popularized on the Eurovision Song Contest. And then you see it in a tour by somebody who can really spend a lot of money. So the equivalent these days, of course, would be Beyonce or Taylor Swift in terms of if they want to get into high-tech stage stuff. So look at the Beyonce Renaissance movie, if you want to see in terms of switching and complex stuff like that, in terms of influential stuff, because that's where the agents will come from. And to some extent, so you come in from some people say the low end, but I would say the real end, which is essentially TikTok and what those things can do, and from news broadcasts. But it depends on your client and the kind of audiences that they're going for and how they want to be taken seriously. So the fashions do change. Serifs are kind of coming back a little bit because graphic designers really like serif, but there are lots of technical problems with it. Just like red came back a lot about 20 years ago because we couldn't have it before.
And we still can't have it. Red is horrible. Like hard red is like, I mean, if you have anything that's going to go through an H.264 compressor, it's not your friend.
Now you know Alex's kryptonite.
So turn that on air switch light off back there. So I would say, there's fashion. There are fashions and all these kind of things, but essentially you have to kind of be with fashion for a while. So I would say in the UK, things sliding in and out of mats, in other words, text coming out of invisible boxes was fashionable for a while, but now we're fading up and melting on and doing slightly more advanced things. So weirdly enough, to some extent, social media graphics are influencing news, which is now influencing business graphics and stuff like that. So I can't point to anything in particular, but I would say maybe things in boxes is going slightly out of fashion. In other words, text and different colored boxes, although laid on top of each other, are more likely to use text over backgrounds, but doing something to those backgrounds, those video backgrounds, to make them still clear as people have text and stuff on top. But different designers, different graphic designers will have different opinions on that.
I try to keep it as simple as possible when I'm building lower thirds, unless someone has a budget to go crazy. Like the worst part is when people don't have a budget and then try to make something super designed, you just end up with kind of it's a road to nowhere. What were you going to say, Alex?
That's the thing. Essentially what happens is you're adding lots of emotional design quality to some text, and then what you're doing is you're overloading it a little bit, and then people are trying to interpret the design and what does it mean, and then you've made it too distracting, and you made people think about what typeface is being used and how blurry it is or how it blurred on or something like that, and as opposed to what the person is saying, because hopefully what's being got across in videos and in broadcasts and news reports and events is emotional and human contact. Mm-hmm. And if human contact is actually being distracted by, oh, that's a pretty effect, then we're in trouble.
Yeah, and it's so easy to be, as a designer, to do things that this is the problem. This is the problem on so many things, but the problem with some filmmaking, the problem with corporate events and other events, and the problem with graphics is the people who do it get bored. And then they want to do something different because they're bored, but it doesn't serve the audience. It's like the audience, and so they're doing things that, make them happy, but it doesn't necessarily make the audience happy, and I think that's the challenge, and then there's some that, I will flat out say that the Thursday night and Sunday night football graphics are the best best I've ever seen. Like if you wanted to do a master's course, take a whole year and just try to reproduce those in After Effects or Motion or whatever, and just try. Don't assume that you can. If you look at the detail inside of those graphics, the level of complexity inside of what's going on there is intense. But yeah, were you going to say something, Alex?
We were talking about motion VFX templates earlier, and they're really, really good. But what you will see in the user interface for the motion VFX templates in Final Cut Pro, and they also do them for Resolve, is they give you every single possible option. You can change the color of everything, the typeface of everything, the position of everything, the position of every single drop shadow. Because, to some extent, naturally, they are motion graphics designers who want to give the features of what a motion graphics designer would like in the editing software. Most editors don't want that because sometimes they're sitting next to a creative person or someone who thinks they're creative. So then you're sitting next to a director or producer, and then they see it as a toy box that they want to play with. And the editor, you just go, no, I just want to show them 3 options, and I don't want any other options to be visible to these people. Otherwise, they'll just want to play, and we have no time for that.
And another thing is consistency of just like, I'm going to give this to 10 editors. I need them to all do it the same way. I don't want them to accidentally or even on purpose change the way the look and feel of the lower thirds because they all have to look the same. And we'll talk about that, which is quickly becoming, just so you know, a part 2 of this will actually be doing the lower third for next week because we got so many questions. But this is a question-driven show, so we're going to answer questions. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, Robert, don't pay attention to what is happening here in the U.S. Dancing bugs in the lower third is very annoying. It's distracting. I think that our friends at the BBC are doing a great job of teaching us how to be simple, clean, and easy. And I think, Alex, you do a few of those.
Go ahead, Alex. What were you going to say?
Yes, I've been involved in the rebrand of the BBC News channel, which is available all over the world. It's available at a TV near you. So I've been involved in some of the packages associated with that. Yes.
And I will say,
the stuff between shows, not necessarily the editorial stuff, which is also really good as well.
The BBC is actually one of my reference points of like for keeping it simple and making it really effective and all the little things there. It's really exceptional. Next question.
And it's from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA. What methods will accommodate Apple motion graphics for live broadcast? What platforms might accommodate motion imports without pre-render into a video playout? Is variable text import possible to rapidly create lower thirds for live?
As I said, there was a company that did this, but I don't think it lasted. So it was just they had kind of gone down that path, but there isn't a way to do that right now. Right now, you're still rendering out those assets. Now, sometimes what happens is you render the background assets and the text replaces, the text is not there, and then your live graphic goes over top of that. Next question.
And it's from Alton Christensen in New York, New York. Slightly off topic, wondering what the best green screen keyers for motion, internal to the app or third party.
Do you use any green screen keyers, Alex?
No, it's not really my world. So I think Hawaii Kikia was a good object-based or recognizing people, but not all, just mainly people, but not objects. But it's like a good automatic keyer. But the keyer that's actually in motion is the same one that's in Final Cut. It's a few more features in it, but it's
really powerful.
Really good.
Yeah, it's really powerful. I mean, that was the end of my product. I had a thing called DVMat, which I funded an entire company for quite some time over the fact that Apple did not have a good green screen keyer. Thank you, Apple. And we appreciate all of the money that you focused it towards my company to do that. But as soon as the new Final Cut keyer came out, I was like, well, that's it. like that. That's the end of that. It's actually a pretty strong keyer. What I use for most of the stuff that I did in the past when we were doing those hundreds of shots of green screen was all Conduit. We built a plugin for Conduit. So we had a nodal compositor inside of Motion, which was the most powerful solution that we had. I mean, it was like having like a mini flame. Next question.
Next question from Eduardo Augustine at Panama City, Panama. What is the most creative content you have seen in lower thirds? The usual is the social media handles, name, job, title, company. Something new?
Now go ahead, Alex. Have you seen anything that you pay a lot of attention to?
Well, I mean, of course, what we're really saying is don't lean on a cool lower third to save your production or spend time trying to find one before you get on and do your work. Because essentially, it's tempting to treat your lower thirds as that one thing I want to put on my tripod or that bit of camera control system. Don't let a simple lower third stop you from just getting on and making stuff. So I know it's tempting to say, because obviously it's possible to make it so that it will be a globe spinning or a map of the world or some live video. Or I must admit, I haven't seen anything that's complicated or advanced that is a good idea recently, because it is tempting to show off and do neat stuff. But then what you're doing is you're speaking to motion graphics people, you're not speaking to the audience. So I know it's tempting to say, I'm really going to make the client amazingly grateful because I found this really cool lower third. But if you edit, or in my case, doing corporate video, when I was doing that, if you come up with a good way of telling the story that really gets the idea across or carries the emotion across, they won't care about the lower thirds. Now, I know we're talking about lower thirds here, but it's more about using them to get information across. And sometimes lower thirds are just statutory. We have to say who they are, but really, if you make the video well enough, it doesn't matter who they are because you care about what they're saying. So sorry.
I once made a lower third that looked like it was a piece of wood that came out, and then looked like someone chiseled the name in, of it, like it did it really, really fast. And it was amazing for the first 2 times we saw it. And after that, it was super annoying. Go ahead, Courtney.
I see a lot on the cable news networks these days. The lower thirds, they'll cut to someone in the field and they'll have their name and where they are. And then they'll have a banner that either scrolls or is static that's basically the topic, pulled Timmy from the well, or whatever the subject of the news story is that person is talking about, so that if you just tuned in, you know what that person is talking about because it has a little tagline or a scrolling banner that tells you what he's talking about.
The crazy one is like for This Week in George Stephanopoulos with ABC, they have this thing that's supposed to tell you where they're going, and they never move past the first one. And you're like, I don't know why you put that there. So you have to look at like what you're putting in there and make sure it's not aspirational. Every week it's like that. It's like Lucy and the football. I mean, it's like you think they're going to actually go somewhere, and then they They do not. So, but I will say that the ones that I enjoy, like I can just sit and watch the lower. If you told me all I get to do is watch the lower thirds for Thursday night and Sunday night football, I can sit there and watch them because they're just it's this treasure trove of graphics. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
So in the case of the BBC, they still call it a ticker, but they rise each story up one at a time and hold it for a little bit. And sometimes a little flashing square to say we've changed it. So flashing square makes you look down and see it and then read that point. But usually they are different stories, not about the current story. So that effectively what you have the choice to do if you're seeing it with the screen off is you're being caught up on everything else, but not necessarily the content that you're in. So it's a real editorial policy thing now.
I'm a big fan of flipping them and not scrolling, because the problem with scrolling is that on lower frame rates, you see this or they motion blur it and you can't read it. So you have one or the other and it never works out. Next question.
Next one in from Robert Shoji in Los Angeles, California. Has Alex created an audio visualizer template in Motion? If so, is the template available?
I have not, but I should. We'll do that as another. I'm not sure which Alex. I mean, I think I talked about it in the past. Have you done any audio visualizers, Alex?
It's not really possible from the point of view for Final Cut Pro audio visualizing. Not directly, not using just Motion and Final Cut.
Not in real time, you mean?
No, so you can't have an audio clip and then have a video clip that includes audio and drop something on in Final Cut Pro, because Motion doesn't get any audio information from the clip. It just doesn't happen. So that's the kind of thing that I used to do in After Effects in the 90s, obviously, in terms of just making cool rave type videos using the sound of the bass and choosing which parts. So there are tools in Motion to say, okay, respond to the bass part of this music or the sound or the treble. You can do that. But that's a render and make in Motion and export as a Motion project, not as a template that works inside Final Cut Pro.
Yeah.
But there is actually a third-party tool, I think, that will do some of that related to that sort of thing. But watch out. Sometimes all you're really doing is setting the BPM, and then it just does a beat to the BPM of whatever music. You have to type in the BPM, and then it just feels like it's in sync, but it isn't really.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama City, Panama. What is the expected amount of details or data in the lower thirds?
Only what you need. Just remember, someone has to read that. So, and I think it depends on how long it stays up there, right? Right, Alex?
Yes. I mean, sometimes what you're doing is for broadcast, another thing, and also to some extent at events, is calls to action. So you want somebody to do something. You want them to use a hashtag, or you want them to put something on social media. So those things stay for longer. It's more, is this directing people to do something, or is it new information to add to what they're seeing? So you have to choose. Essentially, you do end up with a whole kind of palette, like a whole kind of everything turns into Bloomberg, really, effectively. And then if you like, there's always some stuff putting up there. You can put some statistics up the side of your screen saying how many how many posts there've been in the last few seconds on that hashtag. And there's stuff that'll feed into it. But the question is, that's quite good for a display maybe at an event that you're walking past and you just want to catch somebody's eye, and you want to then use that to catch their eye, but really it's the content that should be leading to something. In other words, the content is the thing that is like, okay, that caught my eye because I saw a funny tweet, but then there's the CEO of the organization who's putting this event on, and he's telling me something, or she's telling me, go to this event or do something. It's more calls to action, what to do next with this information. That's kind of what the information's about, if it's not about emotion.
Next question.
Here's a question coming to you from the Adobe guy, me. Is there a way to convert a motion file to a MOGRT file for Premiere Pro?
No, not directly. Effectively, you have to recreate them. Yes, you just effectively have to know After Effects and Motion well enough to be able to recreate one or the other. If I had access to anybody in the Apple team, I would like it if I could press a key, and press the T key to make it so I can set the transparency or the opacity of a motion layer, because it's the kind of thing I'm doing all the time, and all those keyboard shortcuts. I think there is possible to kind of make it so that to make After Effects people more comfortable. But if you want the power of motion, but you like the user interface of After Effects, and you want to have something that has the power of motion from the point of real-time animation and play, then consider, what's it called? Just went out of my head. It's an app which has the real-time animation of motion, but with the After Effects user interface plus grouping, because grouping stuff into layers is very useful. Anyway, I'll come back to it, and I'll say what it is in a minute, once I remember.
Next question.
Jack Ruppel from Breckenridge, Colorado asks, could you see lower thirds being replaced by USDZ in spatial content?
Probably not. Like, I think that you'll use it as objects. I think that you still have lower thirds and other things being, what we've done is really spread those out, but we still have 2D. They're in 3D, but they're 2D layers in a 3D space. Next question.
Next question in from Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. Is there such a thing as a bokeh effect in a lower third or other graphic?
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
You can render lens flares, and then you can make a lens flares. But effectively, remember, to some extent, the graphic design and the graphic features of motion are 2011. So you get the lens flares of 2010, 2011 from that point of view. But Motion VFX do a very nice lens flare extension or generator that you can use within Motion. And then, of course, that will be in Final Cut Pro. But it's not exactly bokeh. But Final Cut Motion can take some footage that's in Final Cut Pro and add a very nice bokeh lens blur to it. So I could actually say, okay, under this person's, any part of the screen, I can select it and make it so that there's pentangles or pentagons or septagons. In fact, there is a free plugin of mine called the Lens Blur, or it's called 7 Free Blurs. But all it is some stuff that was from Motion just made available in the Final Cut, which includes much nicer bokeh. alex4d.com/free1 to see if you can find the stuff to do blurs. It include a nice lens blur things free.
Nice. Last question.
Last question from Eduardo Augustine in Panama City, Panama. Are we going to have a detailed lab on SPX Graphics, create dynamic HTML5, CSS3 lower thirds?
I think it'd be fun to bring in Tuomo and work on those things. So stay tuned for more of those types of things. I think we've had Tuomo on to show some of his new products, but having him come on and actually us building something with him, I think would be a lot of fun. So as you see, we didn't quite get to actually making. We promised a lower third graphic, but we didn't quite actually get to that. But again, the thing to know about how the show works is that we do things to generate questions. To have, to kind of fill in the gaps that you have there. So with Alex's permission, we'll move this lower third conversation to next week and actually immediately dive into making a lower third and sending it to Final Cut and then answering more of your questions about it. But I do think that it's an important little series that we're doing here as an experiment to see, what people think about it and how they want to jump into it. I think at $50, it's one of the best buys in computer graphics ever. As far as utility, I use it almost every day. I don't use it nearly as technically as Alex does, and he sends me projects that confuse me. But so I'm not the same level of skill, but I use it a lot, and it's really for $50 paid once, never an upgrade, never anything else. It's a great tool to have if you're on a Mac side. Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
So before I sign off, I just want to say, if you are if After Effects user and you like the idea of motion, but the user interface is a bit weird, it's called Cavalry. The app is called Cavalry from Scene Group, and it is very friendly for After Effects users, but who want to have a real-time playground. But thank you very much for including me with this, Alex. I'm looking forward to continuing this on an open-ended, let's go with it where the audience wants. Because why not?
Absolutely. So bring your questions if you've got questions. If you start playing with Motion and you've got questions, is there still a 90-day or 30-day version of Motion out there? I don't know. That demo went away. So, but it's $50. So if you get it, just stop drinking coffee for a couple weeks and then you'll be good to go. So anyway, so thanks so much. Thanks to the incredible team that does this every single day. There's a team that's managing these shows that is. Cutting the show, adding the graphics to the show and figuring out how that's going to work. There's a development team, and they get all of this stuff put together every single day, 7 days a week. And we really appreciate your work. And thanks to the panelists. Can't do this without you. And of course, thanks to the great producers who threw in all these extra questions today, which was great. So thanks to the producers who keep this show running and make it a much more enjoyable show, in my opinion. Trying to come up with 2 hours of things to say is a lot harder than just being able to answer your great questions. And so we didn't get to nearly all the questions in the first hour. If a reminder that if we kick your question back, we only send it back to your little hamburger up in the upper right. You can always resubmit those questions. So we had a lot of questions for the first hour that we didn't quite get to. So go ahead and submit those for tomorrow. So anyway, so there you go. We traveled 68,000 miles today, 111,000 kilometers, and that is 546 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
Nice to watch the double-decker buses go by Alex's window. That's always fun.
But for those who can't see me, I'm using the Queen's waving from the carriage.
Wave.
That's what she does from the carriage.
Yeah, there's pot of tea.
I've actually saw the Queen going by in a car a few times on
really?
this road. This is the road that goes out of North London and goes along here.
Great. Did you wave?
No. We're too cool. Too cool for scroll. Yeah, whatever. It's just the Queen.
It's just the Queen, exactly.
Now he's the king. Yes.
All right. See you later. Thanks, Alex. It's great.
Good job, guys. Thanks.